All right, we'll get started. Good morning. Thank you everybody for being here. My name is Joe Hoffman, Joehoffman. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Redondo Beach. And we're here today to talk about one of our cold case investigations. So the Redondo Beach Police Department is fortunate that we have our own investigations division, and we do conduct the majority of our own investigations. However, cold cases are challenging for organizations of our size. We have had numerous experienced investigators that, upon retirement, have decided to take up some of the cold cases in Redondo Beach so that we can actually investigate them ourselves. In 2007, we officially formed a cold case investigations unit at the Redondo Beach Police Department, which since that time has actually conducted now 5 significant investigations. And today we'd like to talk about one of those investigations, which is from 2001. In 2001, plumbers that were doing construction work at a residence located at 1624 Wallaca Street in the city of Redondo Beach discovered a bag with a partial human skeleton that was in the rear yard. The partial skeleton had the skull and a few other random bones that were missing. And the case was worked at the time, investigators were called to the scene, but there really was no progress made, and that case went what we refer to as cold. The case was revived in January of 2019 with the help of the DNA Doe Project, who began a genetic genealogy investigation. DNA was obtained from a small section of the femur that was recovered at that original crime scene. That DNA was extracted in 2020, and it was learned that the DNA sample was from an African American female. That was not previously known from the DNA that was obtained at the scene. The DNA Doe Project was able to create a family tree and provided possible distant relatives to the Redondo Beach Police Department, who in turn located these individuals and then requested DNA from them. After over 2 years of this and contacting over 60 individuals in 6 different states, the Redondo Beach Police Department Cold Case Investigations team was led to a potential relative in Gilroy, California, who provided us with a DNA sample. And this showed that this person to either be a first cousin once removed or a half first cousin to Jane Doe. And this is the closest that our investigation had ever been to actually identifying who the potential victim was. Other cousins of this individual were contacted, and one of those was residing in Memphis, Tennessee, told us that her sister, by the name of Catherine Parker Johnson, had gone missing in the late 70s after moving from Memphis, Tennessee to California. Our investigators subsequently spoke with the son and daughter of Catherine Parker and learned that she had in fact moved to Inglewood, California. She was last seen by the family in May of 1981, and she was never heard from again. She was never reported missing, and our investigation revealed that the last time that there was no one in contact with her was in August of 1981. Investigators asked the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to collect DNA swabs from Catherine's sister and daughter, and both of these matched in a familial comparison to DNA that had been collected at the original crime scene, and it was entered into CODIS, which is the system that tracks DNA. Both the Department of Justice and LA Coroner considered this to be a positive identification of the previously unidentified victim. Our focus today is that we're asking anyone who may have known Catherine to contact the Redondo Beach Police Department Cold Case Investigations Unit, and we are including a tip line and a tip email with this press release. It is important to note that all of our cold case investigators are volunteers. We have 4 from the Redondo Beach Police Department that previously had careers with our organization, and 3 from the DNA Doe Project, which makes the success from these cases even more special. So now I'd like to introduce Missy Koski, who is representative with the DNA Doe Project and will provide additional information on how we were able to identify our victim.
Thank you. Thank you, Captain. Good morning, everyone. My name is Missy Koski, M-I-S-S-Y-K-O-S-K-I. I am an investigative genetic genealogist and volunteer team leader with the DNA Doe Project. The DNA Doe Project is a nonprofit organization that uses investigative genetic genealogy to identify the unidentified remains of Jane and John Does and return them to their families. Our cutting-edge techniques have led us to amazing success, even with cases where the DNA was highly degraded or of low quality. To date, we have helped law enforcement identify over 100 Jane or John Does. It is our commitment that no Jane or John Doe go with their name unnamed, due to the ability of an agency to afford the laboratory work, bioinformatics, or skilled genealogy. Anything that is necessary to identify with them, we do our best to help. Through our Donate program, qualifying agencies can take advantage of our services when their budgets are too stretched to afford this specialized investigative technique. For more information, you can contact us at dnadoeproject.org. The DNA Doe Project was first contacted by the Redondo Beach Cold Case Squad in January of 2019. Soon after, a femur sample was sent for DNA extraction to DNA Solutions and Astrea Forensics. A successful DNA extraction was achieved, and then Hudson Alpha Discovery performed the sequencing. After that process, the DNA file goes into bioinformatics, and that went to Sabre Investigations. Upon that completion, we're then able to upload the DNA file into the database GEDmatch Pro. And at that point, we can look for cousin matches. It took almost 2 years to get to this point from the time the femur sample was sent out because of the degradation and quality of the sample. But we were finally able to get success. We uploaded her DNA profile to GEDmatch in April of 2021. That was when we first learned that she was 100% sub-Saharan African. At that point, I was a little worried that we might not be able to identify her, because if she was of foreign birth and maybe didn't even live in this country, she might not have matches in the DNA databases that were close enough to help. We were very surprised when we did get the results from GEDmatch that she did have matches. And the first and the closest match that we saw was measured at 131 centimorgans. A centimorgan is a measure of the shared DNA between two people. 131 centimorgans can mean somewhere in the area of a third cousin or a second cousin once removed, something like that. So we had something to go on. We soon found, though, that this cousin match was adopted. So we needed to find out her biological family. We did not know that. So that was our first task, was having to go forward and get the cooperation of this match and find who her family was. And we had to use DNA for that because she had no idea. So we had that task. And then while we were doing that, we got permission to upload the file to Family Tree DNA, where we obtained more matches and a slightly closer match. This one was approximately 172 centimorgans, so a little bit closer, but still probably in that second or third cousin range. We had been working several other matches and figured out some ancestors, but we needed to find the key ancestors. The process to use genetic genealogy to identify a Jane or John Doe is very simple, is similar to the process to identify an adopted person's family. The difference is a live person gets to spit in a tube, and then they can use the direct-to-consumer genealogy databases. We don't have all of that available to us. We can only upload the file once it's obtained to two companies, GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA. But once we did work on the matches, because the key to identifying a Jane or John Doe is looking at the cousin matches and building out their family trees. So upon building out their family trees and then being able to go back once we had identified the adopted matches family, we found a key ancestor. And this key ancestor was really the clue that got us going. We found what is called triangulation. Triangulation is when you have two other matches and they match each other and they also match you. And if you can build out their family trees and find that they descend from the same ancestor, and that's where we ended up here with Christopher Columbus Withers, born 1853 in Mississippi. And Christopher Columbus Withers up here was our key ancestor. Christopher Columbus Withers had several marriages, and we found at least 15 children. So we needed to find all of Christopher Columbus Withers' children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren in order to be able to come close to finding who or where the Doe's family was. And it became very difficult because we did not have all the public records available. You know, we're looking at records from the late 1800s. So there was a lot to find, and we got stumped. And we had to kind of circle back and find that we just needed the DNA. We could not find all the descendants of Christopher Columbus Withers or other ancestors that we had found in this family tree and be able to bring them down to the Doe. So at that point, we needed help from DNA matches. And that's where the cold case squad really came into play here. At times, we sent the cold case squad to a lot of places, and I'm sure it may have felt like a wild goose chase to them, but cold case squad investigators, Peterson and Stark, they were key to this operation in contacting family and getting people to successfully upload their DNA to us or actually take a DNA test to help us. It was because of their perseverance and the fact that they trusted us, because sometimes we didn't have good results, but they kept going. And they ended up at this match up in Gilroy, got DNA sample, and that's where we found that this person was an approximate either half first cousin or first cousin once removed. First cousin once removed means maybe a child of a first cousin. So we were very close because we had not been able to build and connect the actual family trees until after we got that DNA. We quickly looked at his close cousins, and we went through all of them and determined who we felt were still alive or we had records of, but there were still a couple that were missing. There were still a couple cousins unaccounted for. And that's where Investigator Stark then reached out to cousins. He was then directed to an aunt in New Jersey, an elderly aunt who knew everyone in the family. And she was the one who identified, you know, I haven't seen this niece of mine. And then he reached out to a sister who then confirmed that yes, Catherine Parker Johnson was indeed missing. At that point, our work was done, but we would have not been able to get to that point without the help of the family of Catherine Parker Johnson and the cold case team here at Redondo Beach Police Department, because this has been an amazing experience. 2 years that I got to work with them, but this was over 4 years in the process with the DNA. The DNA Doe Project would like to acknowledge the contributions of DNA Solutions, Astrea Forensics, Hudson Alpha Discovery, Sabre Investigations for their work. We would like to thank the dedicated volunteers, support staff, and other personnel of the DNA Doe Project who have assisted our research. I am also grateful to have led the talented genealogy team of Rhonda Kevorkian in Texas and a local genealogist here from Torrance, California, Carl Koppelman. I thank the Redondo Beach Police Department, cold case team, and all their support staff here for helping us and trusting us with this case. We are more than proud of everything that has been accomplished here. Our deepest sympathies and condolences go out to the family of Catherine Parker Johnson. May she rest in peace.
So this case really is about science and technology and partnerships. And when this crime originally occurred, that wasn't available. We didn't have this type of science available. The technology didn't exist. We didn't have the investigative unit that was able to conduct cold case investigations. And now putting all of those pieces together and working together, our hope is that we're going to be able to solve this case. The focus today is to try to identify additional information that can provide those shreds of evidence that lead our investigators in the right direction. Throughout this investigation and all the incredible work by the DNA Doe Project, we've been able to develop plausible working theories that are heading us down the right path. But we can still use more information. And that's really what we wanted to stress today, is we'd like the word to get out that anybody that may have additional information, no matter how small it may seem, could be that one piece of information that leads us to the right person that was responsible for this and provides justice to Catherine. And we are able to answer questions if there are any at this time.
Plausible working theories, what does that mean? Do you have some indication of who the suspect might be?
Throughout the investigation, there has been opportunities to identify acquaintances as they were related to the property where the crime originally occurred. However, there hasn't been a suspect who has been identified at this time, but there are opportunities for the investigators to pursue different paths with the hopes of one of those leading towards the suspect that was responsible for this crime. Yes.
What?
Sorry, I'll come back to you.
Can you comment on or have any information on the connection between Catherine Parker Johnson and where her remains were discovered?
Sure. The question is there a connection between Catherine Parker Johnson and where the remains were discovered? Unfortunately, the crime occurred so long ago in the condition that the partial skeleton was found and the residents had turned over. There is very limited information about the actual direct connection to that location. However, that has been explored by the investigators, and the little bits and pieces about the location, the residential area, and the time frame have provided some useful information, but no direct connection to that residence.
Do you have any sense of how long the remains were on the property? Well, the time that passed between when they were found and when she was murdered, and as far as the property, how were they found?
Sure. The question is, do we know how long the remains were on the property prior to being discovered? And the answer is no. We don't know exactly how long they were there. They were in a condition that indicates that they had been there for some time, and they were discovered by a plumber that was doing construction work on the property and had done some excavation in the rear yard and located the bag that contained the partial skeleton. However, the exact time frame for when they may have been placed there is still undetermined.
And quick follow-up to that, were you able to determine a potential cause of death?
Well, unfortunately, the condition of the remains and the fact that it wasn't an entire skeleton did create some questions about the exact cause of death. There are theories that are being explored that could possibly be the cause of death. However, it's still not certain as to why she was there in that condition.
So you're considering her killed in 81, discovered in 2001? Is that?
Well,
Do I have that right, or?
kind of. So
Okay.
the question is, when was she killed and when was she discovered? So she was last seen, the last known contact with Catherine was in 1981. So based on the fact that her last known contact was then, it's reasonable to, for part of the investigation, that it could have been around that time frame since there was no known contacts after that. She was actually found in August of 2001. So the time from her last known contact to the time that she was discovered was 20 years. So it could have been, not necessarily in 1981, but based on the condition of the skeletal remains, it seems like it would have been in that general time frame.
What was her family's reaction when you got in touch with them with this news?
Well, I think that with the family reaction, it's a lot of distant relatives initially, and as the word spreads, I think that it's kind of unbelievable and shocking that a case like this would still be pursued after this many years. I think it's unfortunate that sometimes these types of cases don't get investigated with this much dedication and commitment. And I think that the fact that we can allow the family to have an understanding that this case could potentially be solved and bring closure to them provides a whole range of emotions, from shock and disbelief to emotional feelings, and also encouraged that this may actually be a case that is solved.
This question may be for either of you. You mentioned that she wasn't reported missing and that she had moved to Los Angeles. Were you able to piece together anything about her life, her relationship with her family, why she moved to Los Angeles, what she was doing here?
No, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information about the actual reasons behind her relocation to Inglewood, California. It's a long time ago, so it's hard to find out what may have caused that. As we get closer to solving this case, we may be able to identify additional information about that, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this press conference today, is hopefully we'll get somebody that may have known her in Memphis, somebody that may have known her when she moved to Inglewood. And this case is a long time ago, but there's still people out there that have information. Like I said before, however small it may seem, it could be that one little piece of information that helps us identify some of those holes that are still missing in the timeline.
And the picture that we're looking at is what? This is last picture of her when she was alive?
I don't know if it's the last picture of her when she was alive, but it's one of the better photographs that we were able to obtain through this investigation that we feel provides a photograph that would represent her appearance somewhat at the time that she disappeared.
Which was 23 or 24? 57 to 81, like, was she 23 when she, or 24? I don't know what her birthday was.
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I don't have her exact birthday.
okay.
24.
24?
24.
And then, how old are her kids? Is one kid or two kids?
She has 2 children, and I'm not sure on the ages of those. Yeah, sorry, I don't have any information about the ages of her children, but she does have 2 children.
And what is, it was a plumber that was excavating the site, found the remains. What is that site today? What's there?
It's still a residential property.
It's like a backyard?
In Redondo Beach,
Like someone's backyard?
someone's backyard.
Do her children live in California?
No, neither of her children live in the state of California.
And then was it that same person's backyard now as it was in 2001 when it was found, and was that the same kind of property that it was in the 80s?
No, the property has changed hands.
But it's
and
like still been, it's been a residence the whole time?
It's in a residential area and it's maintained its status as a zoned residential area in the city of Redondo Beach.
Got it.
Missy, I wanna make sure I get this right. Did you say that you spoke with, Ms. Parker Johnson's sister? Or that her sister said that she had been missing?
That would be the cold case investigator
Okay.
spoke with her. I have not spoke to any of the close family.
Got it. And a question for you, Missy, about the work that the organization is doing. Can you talk about the why behind these efforts and investing this time and technology and identifying people who, in this case, may have been murdered decades ago?
This technology really got started with adoptees trying to find their biological families. personally, that's how I learned this. I was adopted here in California, and those records are not available to a lot of us. My records were sealed. There's a lot of other people like me. The founder of the DNA Doe Project, or one of the founders, Margaret Press, who's still at the head here, she was working with adoptees and had just learned the process. And she and the partner who co-founded the DNA Doe Project at the time, Colleen Fitzpatrick, had this idea. We're doing this with adoptees, why couldn't we do this to help identify people that, Jane and John Does who don't know who they are? And just kind of sprang forward with, wow, we can do something here to help. And it's amazing the people that are dedicated to this and put their own time, money, effort into this endeavor, and don't give up. They don't stop. We don't stop. We don't give up on a case no matter how hard it is. It's really remarkable. I'm very proud to work or volunteer in this organization.
Why is it important to identify Jane and John Doe's?
We want to identify Jane and John Doe's to return them to their families. There are so many people, also in the case of Catherine, who just don't know what happened to their loved ones. Sometimes they know that they're missing, sometimes they don't know. And in my particular case, I find it very rewarding to know that if there are children out there, that the children know that their mother or their father did not abandon them. And I think that's really, for me, what keeps it going for me. I think everyone in the DNA Doe Project has a different thought process to that, but it's to give closure to the families and bring them home.
Do you have any sense that she may have been estranged from her family, or why it is that no one has reported her missing?
I don't think they thought she was missing. It's just been a long time, because they knew, as far as I know, I think they knew she had moved to California, and then time just went on.
But for her children, I mean, what did her children think? Did her children think she was alive and well?
I'm not too sure. Maybe you can
Yeah,
answer that better.
It's challenging because we still are looking for some of the pieces to exactly what happened and what prompted her move from Tennessee to California, and what was behind that, and what was the relationship. And we still don't have all those answers. And I think, again, that's one of the main reasons that we're trying to find more information, is so we can fill in all those little pieces, because that might just be that one little piece of information that leads us down a new path and helps us solve this case. So, and that's why it's been so nice working with the DNA Doe Project, because as the focus is returning people to their families, as a police department, we also are very, very interested in finding out who is responsible and bringing them to justice, because that's an equally important part of these cold cases. It is justice for the families, and then also holding whoever's responsible accountable.
How often is this happening, that there are efforts to identify Jane and John Doe's from investigations long ago, but in Redondo, not like more broadly, like in your department? Like, is this a very rare thing? Is this happening and we just don't know it all the time?
In the time that I've been at Redondo Beach, as far as a case of this magnitude with remains in this condition from this long ago, this is really the first one that I've seen where we've extracted DNA and had a successful match from something that had been in place for so long. DNA is emerging technology, and it's very successful, and we use it in a lot of different criminal investigations. But here, to have a partial skeletal remain that had been likely buried for up to 20 years, and then be able to use the science and the technology to actually extract a usable DNA sample is remarkable. And you might see that a lot from large law enforcement organizations, but here we have such dedicated and experienced investigators in the city of Redondo Beach that instead of just letting this case remain as a cold case, we're able to use that science, technology, and partnerships to move a case forward, which is likely going to result in justice and closure for the family, and also finding out who is accountable for this and bringing them to justice as well.
Are you working on any other cold cases now that this one is it's not resolved and they haven't caught the perpetrator yet, but, is your investigative, unit working on other cold cases?
Well, this is the 5th significant cold case since we started a cold case investigations unit in 2007. And the approach that has been the most successful is to have all the investigators focused on one case. And they're volunteers, we had careers with the police department, but we found that when they're able to put all of their efforts into one case, we have the most success. So as we have had successful cold cases that were solved in the past, however, this is the primary focus and the only focus of the cold case unit at this time.
Is it common for law enforcement departments to have cold case, units where it is run by volunteers, and why is that?
I don't think it is. I think that the majority of the cold case units are typically staffed by full-time personnel. And we do things a little bit differently in Redondo Beach. And I think that the fact that we have dedicated investigators who were able to gain a lot of experience during their time working here felt a commitment to the city, cases that they may have been aware of when they were in a full duty capacity and stayed on as reserves or in another volunteer capacity because of the sense of accomplishment and appreciation from the community and from the police department for being able to solve crimes of this magnitude.
And then just one more question on the timeline. So, 2019, is that when you started trying to really identify this Jane Doe, or is it?
Yes, so in January of 2019, that's when the cold case unit took this case, started analyzing what information we did have and reviving that case so that we could get to where we are today.
And had you had the partial skeleton like stored in evidence, or how did you get the femur bone?
The coroner's office maintains all of that, all the skeletal remains based on the fact that they are human remains, and we use LA County Coroner for those types of investigations, that partnership.
Have you been in touch with Inglewood PD or any other agencies in that area regarding the case?
Yes, our cold case investigators, every time we get any possible opportunity for a lead, they're in contact with whatever law enforcement organization may be affiliated or have some sort of information that could head us in the right direction. So there have been contacts with law enforcement organizations, quite frankly, all over the country, as we look for just those tiny little pieces of evidence that may help us bring this case to a successful conclusion.
And then which is the best date to use for when she was last heard from? Because you gave in May of 1981 and then something happened in August of 81, so I'm just,
Well, the
I mean, they're
last,
very close
the
in
last
time.
known sighting was in May of 1981.
And who saw her last?
Her daughter.
Her daughter, who was still in Tennessee at the time?
Yes, Tennessee.
How old are her children now?
48, 49.
And they're both in Tennessee?
So the question was, how old are her children? And the answer is she has 2 children that are 48, 49 years old that are both still in the state of Tennessee.
So she moved here from Tennessee alone, presumably, or the children stayed in Tennessee?
The best information that we have is that she, in 1981, she left Tennessee and relocated to Inglewood, California. And then shortly thereafter likely was the victim of this crime and then was found in 2001.
But she was not here with her children?
That's correct. She was not here with her children.
Did she come here with a husband or a man?
I'm sorry.
Did she come here with a partner or significant other?
There's no information that she traveled here with anybody else. Again, that'd be one of the key components that we're looking for with the press conference today is somebody that may have recalled traveling in 1981 with Candace from Tennessee to Inglewood, or a family member that had a recollection of a travel companion. So we don't have any information about that, but that would be information that would be very useful as the investigation continues.
You talked about potential leads connected to the property. Have you been able to make contact with every person who owned the property going back to when the remains were here?
No, unfortunately, they haven't been able to contact all of the people that did have ownership or stayed at the property because it's such a long period of time. There has been attempts made and the property has changed hands multiple times. So the investigators are aware of the history of the property, and that continues to be an aspect of the investigation.
What will become of her remains?
Well, some point, if the investigation is concluded and they aren't needed for any sort of court proceedings, then there may be an opportunity to work with the family for a service of some sort that the family deems appropriate.
This picture on the right, is it where the remains are found? What are we looking at on the right of this human remains identified?
Sorry, I have to run, take a look at it. Yes, that's exactly what that is. So that's a photo from the backyard of the residence at 1624 Walcott Street when the investigation was being conducted where the remains were found in 2001.
And does a different person live there now?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so the
property's-
person now has nothing to do
And it
with
may
the
not even
property then?
be, it may not be even have the same appearance. The property has
Okay.
changed hands multiple times. It is still zoned as a residential property in Redondo Beach, but
Can you speak to how her children, and I don't know if I missed this, if her parents are still alive, how her family feels about raising awareness about this case, by getting it out there through the press? If they've said anything they want to communicate through reporters.
we don't have any information about her parents for you today. The key is getting the information out there that we need additional information on people that may have known Candace prior to her making the trip from Tennessee to California. And that's really the focus of what we're doing today is, I know that there's some people out there, even though it's been a long time, that likely had contact with her, knew her in Tennessee, maybe traveled with her to California, maybe lived with her in Inglewood, and that's really what we're focusing on today. As far as any other familial connection, we've made contact with those in the family that we feel can provide us information, and now we're looking for additional outlets that might be able to provide additional useful information.
Does anyone in her family know that you are getting the case out there through the press, and do you know how they feel about it?
Yes, we've made contact with the family and discussed where we are in the case and the fact that additional information would be useful and would help us likely make additional progress in the case. And the family's appreciative of the efforts of both the police department, the DNA Doe Project, and all the other partners that we've had as we've progressed with this investigation.
And she was coming here to live, not to visit?
The understanding that we know is that she was relocating from Tennessee to California. However, it's been so long and such limited information that any additional pieces that we could get would likely help us move forward.
But when you said like one of the reasons this is important is so that children know their parents didn't abandon them, it's an emotional type of thing. Was that her children's presumption? I know you didn't speak with them, but I don't know if the full case
I can't
investigators.
speak for their presumption or anything, but I know they want this case solved. They want the closure for their mother and they want this case solved.
But prior to this, did they know their mother had been killed? Do you have any idea?
Well, it was just, they knew that she was missing. And our investigation has allowed us to provide them with additional insight into what happened and what her life involved. And we're hoping to be able to provide additional information and solve this case and provide some closure for the family. And like I mentioned before, also bring whoever is responsible to justice as well. So, okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here.